as the party of working people, and we have a Labour Party that presents itself as an aspirational party.
Yeah.
Where does that leave the Liberals? How can we identify ourselves as being authentically centre ground?
Well, I mean, those are both utterly contrived positions.
Of course they are.
And so we need to have an uncontrived
Yes.
position. And it was very interesting. So the big issues upon which I think we should campaign on, I mean, the smaller the party nationally in terms of our parliamentary presence, the bigger the issues we need to pick. But the list does not need to be big. It needs to be very, very tight. And one of those, undoubtedly, in my view, needs to be housing. And I picked that for lots of reasons. A, I'm passionate about it. It's kind of what drove me into being a Liberal in the first place. I watched Kathy come home, it broke my heart. I bought a £1.50 postal order, I joined the party. But it's also a simple calculation that everybody has to live somewhere. And the Labour Party, I should say, I've noticed their position on the Housing Association sell-off, which I think is maybe the big domestic issue in this Parliament potentially. They were critical of the government, but they would not go as far as to say they would oppose right to buy. Last week, David Cameron challenged and teased and toyed with Harriet Harman on the issue, and she would not oppose right to buy. Well, I would, actually. And I think we need to say that, aspiration, all right being in favour of aspiration. My principal aspiration is the 2 million people on a council house waiting list, that we get a home for them. And so we can be bold in a way which is not contrived, because I think the Labour Party's attempt they're either going to try and ape the SNP and sound ridiculous because the electorate is different outside of Scotland, or they're going to try and do a carbon copy of Blair and probably not do it as well as Blair. Either way, there's bags of space for us, because what there clearly isn't is a Liberal Party. And the Tory Party's emphasis on some of those kind of reactionary issues, surveillance, human rights and so on, really gives us loads of space. And I personally, the three that immediately come to mind are housing, climate change in particular, and indeed civil liberties. But we also need to be, fleet of foot and pick issues as they arise. I remember one of the ways that Paddy Ashdown helped us to retire from the last near-death experience was by picking issues that probably 50% of people didn't care about, and 80% of people didn't agree with us on. But nevertheless, it showed principle and commitment and clarity. So you might remember that after Tiananmen Square, Paddy campaigned for the people of Hong Kong to be given British passports in the event, as indeed did happen, of Hong Kong returning to China. Most people either didn't care or thought this is terrible. But there was a very large minority of people who thought, that's a principled guy. That party is saying something different and edgy. And we will need to be different and edgy. Because although first past the post is our, the great challenge we live with, don't forget in Scotland and Wales and London next year, we need to be basically be able to clock up 15% across regions to win seats that way. And if we can appeal to that chunk of the Liberal section of the electorate, now that hopefully they've got their fingers out of their ears after we've left government, then we're in a good position. Sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Going back one step to discussing kind of the last general election, one thing I think we will have to do a damn sight better is actually orchestrate our national campaign. As a Liberal Democrat and a committed Liberal Democrat, I was very disappointed with the actual running of the campaign. The share of voice that Liberal Democrats had in the national media was pitiable. We allowed the debate over who was going to do a deal with whoever in the coalition to kind of completely overwhelm anything that the Liberal Democrats wanted to say about specific policy areas. All of the chat about, the SNP, that was jolly good for the SNP, but it didn't allow any space for us. And I do think that our communications activity during the course of the campaign was extremely poor, and unfortunately that has got to be an indictment of head office and those in the party who were responsible for orchestrating it. That's just my thought.
Tim, before you respond, should we just take a few
why don't we do that? I'll try and respond to
new members. I know Robert was also. Are there new members, Kevin was one, but others who'd like to say something?
Yeah, hi, Chris Davis, we've been in contact.
We are.
Hi. If you turn that, sorry to put you to task here, Tim.
Yeah, go on.
If you turn that over,
Top one down.
top one over.
Yeah.
If it is that one, yeah, that's got it. There you go. I think that's the core problem.
Right.
It's identity. I'm a businessman.
Yeah.
I build a business. I have to get people, it's like a perfect pitch, to get what I'm about in 30 seconds, or else I'm out the door.
Yeah.
All right, so what's your perfect pitch?
Great.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. No, all right, okay. I'll give me a moment.
You think about it.
Thank you.
Let's just let's hear from Nigel.
Just coming back to one of the things you mentioned about issues that throughout holiday.
Yeah, it's in the cover.
Coming over here. Apparently the main candidates for the leadership have all refused back away to attack too closely the Tory policy on limited benefits.
That's right, yeah.
Is that one of the things that we might pick up on?
Thanks, and could we just hear from Robert? Robert is, should we say that you're not quite a member? Is that right? Not everybody in this room is a member, and I think it's worth saying.
The latest is that I was completely in favour of the coalition, and I wanted to vote for the last coalition, except that wasn't on the ballot paper.
Yeah.
And the constituency I was in was a very tight one, and I kept changing my mind as to which one, and in the end I voted Lib Dem, despite the fact that I was one of the very few in the constituency that did. But my question is, I find it strange, it's probably a conundrum, that parties elect the new leader before they've worked out what the problem was. No, that each of the Labour and Lib Dems lost, and they have to, the party leaders resigned, and so they rush in to put in another leader, but there's a huge amount of work needed to understand what went wrong. And I find it strange that we're asking you to stand there and tell us the answers, because we don't understand what the problem was yet.
Great.
So do you have a view on the situation you've been
on
landed
the
in?
process? So I try and want the order to do these things. I'll deal with the difficult one first.
Yes.
The question is it my pitch to be leader, or is it our pitch as a party? So I'll take it as our pitch as a party. So I believe in active, ambitious Liberal government. In other words, government that rolls up its sleeves, does not wash its hands. So small government, generally speaking, means weak citizens. But if you want just to build the state for the sake of it, then you've forgotten the point that really matters, which is the individual. So it's all about concentrating on people's freedom and understanding that nothing robs you of your freedom more than poverty, poor housing, inequality. So that's a bit cerebral, and we'll pithy it up. But I think I thought there was lots wrong with the message. I mean, in the 1980s, when you had Margaret Thatcher out here and Michael Foot out here, a centrist argument, which might well have been a bit dull, but nevertheless a centrist argument was plausible because there's a load of space to fill. And, whatever one thinks about Miliband and Cameron, they're not Thatcher or Foot, neither in their extremism nor in their quality. Bless them. But I think that neither this nor the other was just a really inspiring message. And so just a general issue is that this election just gone was not a cerebral election, it was a gut election. And actually, generally speaking, that is how it works. You need to catch a mood and move it, or you need to set a mood if you possibly can. And for us, that's what we've got to do. We've got to get people in their gut. People have to look at us and believe that, given that 93% of all communication is non-verbal, that there's something about our jib, the cut of which they like. And you look at it's a great story, it's a true story that Matthew Parris tells about canvassing for the Tory candidate in the Crosby by-election against Shirley Williams in 1982, and knocks on a lady's door, always down as a Tory. I trust you're voting Tory again, madam. No, I'm voting for Shirley because she'll send the blacks back and pull us back out of Europe. Matthew Barris pointed out that Shirley Williams did not think those things. And I can assure you she didn't and does not think those things. Bring back hanging, that was the other thing. But the point is, this woman had decided she liked the cut of Shirley's jib and she was prepared to ascribe onto Shirley anything she liked. Now, I'm not saying that's the position we want to be in, but I am saying you want to be in a position where people want to think that you're one of them, want to think that you like them and that you are like them. Charles Kennedy had that, for instance. And although it pains me to say it, Nigel Farage has occasionally had that too. And so I think that is what we need to be looking for. I wouldn't blame the campaigns department. I think most of the problems that we had going into the election were the die was cast. I'm afraid the die was cast. I think probably the moment we broke the tuition fees pledge, the die was probably cast. I wish it wasn't so, but if people aren't listening to you, it almost doesn't matter what you say, and that's a real problem. And so the question about the analysis, I think that's kind of my analysis to a degree, and I think the Labour Party are going to go through this. They don't know where to go. Are they to become left wing, right wing? What do they do, like Scotland? Do you know? I think our job's a lot easier. I think it's fairly obvious what happened. We did the right thing by the country going into power 5 years ago. I'm dead proud of Nick Clegg and all the things that we achieved in government. We made some errors, I think, but people do, and that's what happened. I mean, it doesn't really need much more explanation than that. What we need is a vision to go forward, and it's about getting people in their gut, inspiring people, and being able. When you've only got 8 MPs, just over 1% of the House of Commons, you're going to have to shout very loud, be very distinctive, and jar quite a lot with the Westminster normality to be able to be taken seriously, and we go from there. But in terms of rebranding, I think that's dead important. I'm not of the view we should be renaming the party or anything like that, but I do think we should look very, very carefully about how we project ourselves. And we've got some very good people involved around the party. So we don't need to spend a lot of money on doing this. We have some top people who can help us to do it, and I would want us to do it quite quickly.
Two in the middle there.
Yeah.
Hi, Tim. Given that you weren't given any chance to actually get any words together when you were talking to Andrew Neil the other day, would you mind possibly clarifying your view on LGBT rights, please?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in favour of them. I'm in favour of equal marriage, and in the end, so I voted for it at a second reading. But as a Liberal, I kind of think it's right to kind of probe where you're concerned about certain issues. And the two basic factors when it came to the equal marriage bill that I think Liberals were right to ask questions about. One is the issue about conscience exemptions for practice of marriages if you've got people who find it personally difficult because of faith or whatever other reason. And then the other, almost an opposite concern I had, is that equal marriage wasn't equal enough because transgender people don't actually have the same rights as lesbian or gay people. And the spousal veto is actually quite illiberal. So I mean, if I had my time again, to avoid confusion, I'd have just gone through on the third reading. But I still think it's right. If Liberals can't ask those questions, I don't know who can really.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't realise they weren't equal for transgender.
By law they are, but if you are a transgender person and you are married to a person when let's say you were male and you transitioned to being female, if you're married to a woman, that your partner can object to the change in the birth certificate to enable you to be divorced and to remarry. Which is effectively preventing, allowing the existing married partner of a person who transitions to prevent them marrying, and that seems to be illiberal.
Could we hear from some of the new members about why you joined up, the members who joined since the election?
Could I just ask you sort of a party argument? You slightly apologised for using the word authentic earlier, and I would say please don't apologise. And I would say one of my lowest moments in terms of becoming seriously fed up with general political discourse in this country was I was driving home one evening the day after the European elections when we did very well in the local elections, and I was listening to PM. And I forget who was on the panel from the Lib Dems, but what I do remember was both Tories, Lib Dems, was elect people for Labour, were all saying in very honeyed terms, the electorate have given us a message and we have to listen. And I was thinking, no, I don't want you to listen. I didn't vote for you. I find their message abhorrent. Please don't race to the lowest common denominator. And so you used another favourite word of mine a minute or two ago about being a distinctive voice. And I just say, absolutely, I think we need to be a very distinctive voice. We need to stay out of the traditional ding-dong. There go the electorate, we must follow them. No. Let's say, look, we've got something interesting to say now. Speak to people and say, come, follow us. We've got a good story. We see a different way of doing things around here. Because I think people are. I think you're right about the last election. People they'd had enough of it all, actually. And they felt that things were economically getting slightly better. I think most people felt. And so they voted for what they call certainty. But certainty was a safe choice, not a visionary choice. That's why I'm here, by the way, because I just don't want that old kind of, we have to listen to what loonies like UKIP say and follow them. No, thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, a slight follow-up to that. One of the things that I feel most incensed about with our society is inequality. Inequality of housing, inequality of education opportunities, inequality of wealth. And I was very pleased to see that in your email, which I read this morning, that seems to be a strong point with you. But I'd like to know how you think it should be tackled, because from my point of view, the only possible way of tackling inequality of wealth, certainly, is taxation. And that's likely to be an unpopular policy, judging by the last election. So how do we tackle it?
Okay, great.
Could I just ask, just following up on your comments about Charles Kennedy, there were two other things that have been particularly mentioned in his context. One was when he spoke about what he really believed in, he talked about social justice, which for me is really important, and justice, I would guess, is hugely important to most liberals, whether it's your support for fair trade or whether for human rights or climate change. That's where I think instinctively most people would feel that's where the liberals are. So there was that, what does social justice mean? And is social justice something for the liberals really to champion now? And the other point I thought that I've not really thought through, but I'm really interested in what you thought, is that he voted against the coalition. He was your one MP who voted against going into coalition.
John Leach did too. Okay.
Did he? Oh, so there was the second one. And I just wondered, isn't there a way in which you can do that? Does it have to be? Do you have to go into coalition with people? Why can't we? Okay, this is the first time we've done coalition government, and I don't think anybody's liked it particularly. I don't think any voters have liked the coalition hugely. Well, not a sufficient number. Well, not a sufficient number. People like me who voted Liberal since the 70s didn't vote Liberal this year. But isn't there another way of doing it as well? You don't have to go into coalition. And can we set that scenario as well as that being an alternative?
Okay.
Yeah, but the bedroom tax, did we really go against that? Because that is a poll tax, the bedroom tax. So did we really push against that in the
Okay, great. So some great questions. I'll try and deal with them in order, and I'll try and be brief. So the first one, I don't apologise. I think we should be authentic. I just think when you use the word authentic, you're being contrived, aren't you?
Genuine.
That's right. Yeah. You should be those things. You should have those people say those things about you. You should be saying them about yourself. You see what I mean? But so I agree. But no, your point is very right. And I was very often that guy on election now the last 5 years who was having to kind of commentate on disaster. And to my mind, the way to deal with it is just to be honest, and we'd had shocking results, and listening to the electorate. Well, one has to do that. One sometimes has to disagree with the electorate as well. And there are two forms of leadership. One is where you see which way the crowd's following, you run around the front. That's not leadership. And the other is you boldly stake out a position and you try and persuade people to come with you. And the point of rhetoric, of politics in general, is to move people from there to there. And as I said earlier on, you tend to move them here rather than here. And that's what we must do. Inequality, so we kind of cover the two issues really together in social justice. I think that, first of all, I think it's important for us to be able to explain in a pithy and emotive way that inequality is more than just about things that are not morally right. It is, of course, utterly morally wrong that you have people with such a totally different life chances because of the misfortune or fortune of where they were born and to whom they were born. It's also immoral and wrong that women get paid so much less than men. Immoral and wrong that the chances of people from non-white communities are so much less in this country. Immoral and wrong that so many regions of the United Kingdom are poorer than others. Morally wrong and utterly stupid, because it's about wasting talent. And that's the thing that occurred to me when I was as a kid and growing up in a poor area. And I look at the number of people who just didn't amount to anything in my school, and I think, well, these people are no less bright than the people at the posh school 6 miles up the road, and it's a waste of talent to do that. It's a phrase I can only keep using. If you're a business and you only use 20% of your people and 20% of your space, you'll be an idiot and you would fail, and that's Britain. And we need to be much clearer about the pragmatics of fairness. And how do you do it? Taxation and so on. Well, I recall when we had 20 odd years ago, one of our policies, which was put a penny on income tax to pay for £2 billion worth of investment in education. That was hugely popular, and it was hugely popular for two reasons. A, it gave people a sense that Lib Dems care about schools, and B, these are the sort of decent people who will tell me when they're going to put my taxes in. They're doing something counterintuitive. And I think that's an important thing, and we need to, particularly after fees, do something which restores trust by demonstrating bravery. And so I'm not saying we should just take that policy off the 1992 shelf and use it again, but I'm saying that's not a bad model for us to be going forward with. And yeah, we should want to go into power.
It's a good idea.
It is a good idea.
And you spell out.
Where's the money going to go?
With this much.
Yeah.
If we abolish the benefits agency.
Yeah.
And we allow doctors to tell us when people are not well enough to work. Completely. How much money will that save, and what could you spend it on?
I mean, the idea of hypothecated stuff like that is obviously that worked to a degree in the past. Yeah, absolutely. They don't like you one little bit. But in terms of turning our back, I think we did the right thing going into coalition. I think the alternative. So I disagree with Charles and John Leach at the time, and I still think that we did the right thing and the only thing we could have sensibly have done. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and in hindsight, I think the only other alternative to what we did was to have allowed the Tories to govern as a minority for what would have been 5 or 6 months, and there would have been an October-November general election, and the Tories would definitely have won it. Now, in hindsight, you might say, well, you'd still have ended up with more than 8 MPs. Yeah, we would probably have ended up with more 8 MPs, and those 5,000 children detained for immigration purposes, the children of asylum seekers locked up under New Labour, would still be being locked up, and we stopped that. And all those good things that we did in those 5 years would never have happened. And if you want to be in power, if you want to stand for election, you should want to be in power. And my concern is we need to go in with much wider eyes next time round. And that's why I think PR is an absolute must. Bedroom tax, just very, very, very quickly. I mean, a number of us voted against it and felt that whilst the principle of only paying people housing benefit for the rooms that they need is fine, that's happened in the private rented sector, introduced by Labour, by the way, but to do it retrospectively to people who were relying on that second room, maybe they were a dad who cared for their children 2-3 nights a week, but that didn't count, and or all sorts of reasons, it struck me as being a very, very wrong thing. And although it wasn't called a bedroom tax, that epithet stuck. Like the poll tax, it was effectively a tax, so that you couldn't avoid paying. And so our policy has now moved away from that. If it had anything to do with me, I wouldn't repudiate much of our time in coalition, because I think we did a load we should be dead proud of, and that's something I think we should never have signed up to.
Can we hear from the two young men at the front about why you joined, you guys?
Hi guys, I joined. Hi guys. I joined because too many of my peers didn't know enough about what was going on, and as a result of that, they jumped on one wing or the other, and quite violently. And I felt that if I wanted to help that situation, I should get involved so I could know more, so I could tell people more, and just help inform rather than push.
Brilliant. That's great.
Ollie.
I signed up because I've voted Lib Dem ever since I was 11. When I was able to in '97, and there was a school election. But I've quite a few of my friends were Liberal Democrats at university. Since then, I've moved around quite a lot, and it's the first time I felt in a stable enough position to be able to say, okay, now I can actually hopefully sign up and try and push the message out. I've tried to convince as many people as I can over the course of the last each election over the last 10, 15 years, and I feel like it's a better idea to kind of get involved and have more of a kind of voice. I think one of the things that really struck was after the election when Paddy Ashdown was talking about being a party, the civil party. And I know definitely one of the arguments that convinced me when I was younger was an intellectual argument. And to hear you say about the idea of it being in the gut, these are not necessarily things that are all kind of, I can't necessarily see a way of kind of making that a coherent strategy, but I can see that it's kind of like going to get onto everything from different angles and different sides, and yeah, try and push it forward really.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, just giving you, I said it earlier on, but you've made an enormous difference to people's morale here. And the reasons people have joined around the country they're not dissimilar. And there is this great sense that of almost people being a little indignant, really, that there's an unbelievably essential component in British politics that could be eliminated. And we need to understand that we are under real threat. But I also think this could be a very bad 5 years to be in government. And the Tories have made their bed in a way which is going to be very uncomfortable. The EU referendum is not going to end well for them. It was a sticking plaster policy to stop the two wings of the party killing each other, and now they've got to go through it. And you've got this party within a party of 50 or more MPs who are opposed to, who are going to basically call for a no vote. And we all remember what happened to Labour after the 1975 referendum. It led to the formation of the SDP effectively. And all those awful, tough decisions we had to grapple with the last 5 years, they were the low-hanging fruit, comparatively. What we've got to deal with now, what Labour, what the Tories are in power will have to deal with now, will be cuts that are unspeakable. If they are determined to do that without doing what we suggest, which is to make sure you raise taxes on the wealthy to balance it out. But if they eschew that option, and it looks like they're going to, it could be absolute carnage. And I wouldn't want to be a Tory MP defending my seat in 2020.
Sorry, do you think we've got kind of history on our side? Very briefly. Because if you think about 1970, what happened then? Before my time, but then 1974, we came back massively.
Yeah.
So do you think that? I mean, what I'm seeing at the moment going around, kind of like this region, is buyer's remorse.
Yeah, buyer's remorse is a great. We were the victims of buyer's remorse in 2010,
yeah.
And we are hopefully the beneficiaries of it this time. So I was born in 1970. In fact, I was born a fortnight before. First of all, we got annihilated in the general election, and I think 3 weeks before England got knocked out of the World Cup as a whole. So we were the champions when I was born. So I have no recollection of this whatsoever. But I think what was interesting in the following 4 years, it just shows what's possible. History doesn't tell you what's going to happen, but it does give you some information as to what might happen. And surely our job is to make sure that we have a really clear, very distinctive, very passionate voice on the issues that matter to people. I will be very surprised if I can lead us to 25% of the vote and 50-60 seats in 2020, being entirely blunt with you. But I think we can absolutely double our vote, increase our number of seats, and we'll do that by starting in the grassroots, by giving people a reason to vote for us, ward by ward. And St Albans is a place where there's great strength for even greater growth. You got a good result in the general election, but you got 30% in the locals, which is stunning given the night that we had, and says an awful lot about you guys. But going forward, there's lots of places we've got nothing at all. There's plenty of places. I was in Cornwall at the end of last week, and then to Plymouth. Well, we had a bad result in Cornwall, but in Plymouth we don't have a single councillor. Well, I think one of the things I want to popularise is the notion that pick a ward and win it. If you're in a black hole, pick a ward and win it. And you can do what you do with what we've done in Westmorland, for example, maybe not across a whole constituency, but you can do it in one ward, a couple of thousand houses, whatever it might be. And so we need to do that and earn our place back on the map. And we need to pick issues. And I'm told that I spend a lot of my time around the country. should I become leader. That is absolutely true. I also need to be quite savvy and spend at least one day a week, like a limpet on the walls of the Millbank Studios near Westminster, where all the TV and the radio is. Because, you know, if you're going to learn anything from Farron, it is get yourself on the media and talk about the things that other people are talking about, but set a liberal agenda in doing so. And I think the Tories are going to do what they're going to do, and Labour are going to be so terrified of being boxed into a more progressive place, basically. There will be space for us, and I've just got to make sure we use it. So yeah, we doubled our number of MPs in that Parliament from 70 to 74. We start winning a bunch of by-elections, and I wish nobody any ill health whatsoever. However, we spent the last 5 years dreading the next one. Let's be in a position where we relish the next one.
Well, I was quite interested in you just talk about investment there in the regions, Tim. I'm from the East Midlands originally. It's not a deprived region by any means, but it's also somewhat behind, London and the south-east. So what kind of things could the Liberal Party or the Liberal Democrats put forward to encourage investment outside of the south-east?
In a nutshell, I think that just to go back to what I was saying earlier on about the inefficacy of inequality and how bad it is for the country, the underuse of other regions of Britain, nations of Britain, is bad for the south-east and for London, for what it's worth, as well, because we put too much emphasis on them, too much weight upon them. And so the answer is actually about investment and about opening up the possibilities for the other parts of the UK to be more successful. And whilst amongst the things that we got out of coalition that we mustn't lose is this notion that Liberal Democrats can be competent in government and economically credible. And we need to retain those things at all costs. And that includes, for example, saying, yeah, we should clear the deficit. But there are 2 forms of government spending, broadly speaking. One is revenue spending, where you clear the deficit carefully and fairly in a balanced way. And there's capital spending, where if you're intelligent, you should let rip. And we should introduce something, maybe call it an Office of Capital Expenditure, on a similar footing to the Office of Budgetary Responsibility, whose job it is to monitor the tax efficient and multiplier effect of capital spending and borrowing, and you make sure you do things that are of great value. So the things that the 4 things that strike me as being top priorities for all parts of the UK, but to understand that north-south communications links in this country are pretty good, and east-west are absolutely shocking, and so we need to be able to deal with that. And it's, as a northerner, I'm actually in favour of HS2, but it's a slightly insulting prospect that says the only thing you need, you northerners, or you Midlanders, or you East Anglians, or whatever you may be, you West Country folk, all you need for fulfilment and economic prosperity is be able to get to London a bit quicker. Actually, and so this notion that northern powerhouse, well, it's not very northern, it's not a powerhouse. Apart from that, it's fine. The Leeds to Manchester upgrade, fine, that's okay. HS3 is Hull to Liverpool. Making sure that because London is a wonderful world-class city, we should be proud of it. But we should make places like Nottingham, for example, matter intrinsically, not be just insofar as they can get to London more quickly. So transport infrastructure is really massively important. I'd say broadband is absolutely critical, and many of us in rural areas think it's just a rural issue. It jolly well isn't. You've only got 2 megabits per second in Stepney, in London, for
Even in the city of London.
Yeah, absolutely.
I work 200 metres from the Dartford tube station, and we're on top of fire.
There you go. And a lot of that is down to the fact that British Telecom has the best copper network in the world, probably, and they are a private monopoly, and they have no real incentive to go the way that they ought to. So we ought to be splitting BT and BT Openreach, and we should be making sure there is this is not party policy, but I think this, now we'd like it to become party policy, that you have basically a universal service obligation, which means that the provider has got to provide, I would say, a minimum of 50 megabits per second. If you think that South Korea, a champion of the free market, have never intervened on behalf of business and everybody else, they're going to have a gigabit per second by the middle of next year, 1,000 megabits per second, and they're doing it by a universal service obligation. So we should be doing that. We need to build 3 million houses in 10 years. I talked a little bit about how you do that earlier on. You let housing associations off the leash and allow them to borrow against the value of their stock. And the 4th thing is absolutely climate change. I mean, I can answer maybe other people's questions on this as well. I think climate change is the biggest single earthly threat we face. We have to be the people who speak about it, but speak about it in a way which will compel people to change what they do. And my great concern is this, that if climate change is something that is only seen as an esoteric concern for the Guardian reading classes, then we'll never tackle it. We'll never tackle it. And if our answers are hair, shirt and austerity, so turn the lights off a bit, cycle a bit further, it's good, you should all do that. It's not going to win enough people to change society in a way you actually stop this problem. So the real problem is that a real solution is that we make this into a kind of collective, almost patriotic endeavour, which will involve some investment. So that's the point I was getting to. So we're great that we've got the tidal lagoon in Swansea. We need about 25 or 30 of those around the country. Great news is 95% of the supply chain for marine, tidal and hydro is British. And so my point is that you can inspire people that climate change affects them, because the mass movement of hundreds of millions of people because of climate change will affect everybody. It will cause famine, disease, want, war, and the whole blooming shebang. But the answers don't need to be miserable hair shirt answers. They can be exciting answers. They can be about Britain being rebuilt, almost Victorian style, with a great new infrastructure that is green and carbon free. And so that's how I would deal with those things. I need to get out there and communicate what are important things, but potentially dry things in an inspiring way. So when I talk about moving people in their gut, I don't mean issuing detail, I don't mean not bothering with policy, I absolutely mean all of those things, but I also mean that you have to make busy people sit up and be inspired. And if we can't make the hairs and the backs of people's necks stand on end, we aren't going to win very much back in this next 5 years. And I believe we can do that.
Just on identity, I mean, to me, I couldn't join another party because I think this is the only party where the individual counts. There may be on lots of different policies you might agree with that party, but this is the only party where it's about the individual, and that if we want social justice, it's because we think the individual can flourish better. And if we want democracy, it's because we want the individual to have a say in how they run themselves. And most things can come back to this individual.
Yes.
Whereas I think the Tories have got a view of what the perfect world would be like, and I think Labour have as well.
Yeah.
We're not so interested. I think we're quite pragmatic, and in a way, we're sort of friends with the world we've got, pretty much, wanting to change bits and bobs, but not change people into being something else. You know, to be 1950s Britain or whatever. Yeah. We want people to be who they are, and make that easier for them to be who they are.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, that's a challenge to that. But having worked on party housing and local government policy in the beginning of the coalition government, absolutely agree with you on the gut feeling, because I think that's essential to drive it through fuel. But how do we engage to have those conversations within the party which says, if you try and balance your taxation and housing and environmental policy, and we come to something that would actually work, that would actually be implementable, we might have to break a few eggs. We might have to talk about proper taxation on housing. We might have to talk about sensible building where we've got transport links, things so we don't become sacrosanct. But we might be thinking about what makes the biggest impact on the environment, and it's not just the things that people might like because they can see, but actually a lot of the stuff that's invisible that actually having that impact. How do we lead those conversations? Because I think we really can lead them. But how that combination with that gut feeling, but when you start to dig into it, it actually adds up. And it actually makes sense all the way through the way we're growing.
Great. There's another question to around here.
Oh, it is, how do you change the tone of the talk about people who are running away from appalling situations and end up trying to, all the people are drowning in the Mediterranean, and all the people stuck in detention centres in this country, and they are the only people in captivity who have no appeal to law. In this country.
So
if you're mentally ill and sectioned, you can appeal. If you're a prisoner, you can appeal. If you're in a detention centre, you can't do a bloody thing.
Yeah. So three questions there. I mean, I think in terms of the individual, as a party, you need to demonstrate what you're for and who you're for. And I kind of think that we often as a party consider ourselves to not have any vested interests. We'll say, the Labour Party have their vested interests, the Tories have theirs. And for us, surely we do have vested interests. They are the powerless people in your street. That's who you think of. That's on whose behalf you operate. And I think that is how that has got to be our starting position. In terms of the broader thing about how we change policy and so on, we should be, when I talk about active, ambitious Liberal government, we need to be ambitious for the government, we need to be ambitious for the party. And so, a great Liberal who we should all, be grateful to for more than one reason, is William Beveridge. And you've got to remember, William Beveridge, who wrote the blueprint for a better Britain post-war, he was an MP for 1 year, one single year. And he was a member of a party about the size we are now. And he had the audacity, you might say, to look beyond what was possible to what was necessary. And so, yes, we are where we are now in terms of our vote share and our number of seats. Stuff that. We've got a vision for a better Britain. And we're going to talk about it in those sorts of terms. And we will have to end up in some debate with the party. One of the things that I helped to move forward when I was party president was the introduction of one member, one vote for the party conference. So we're going to hopefully within the next year have a situation where you don't have to go through this labyrinthine process to get yourself to a conference. You can, if you're a member of the party, you can go and you can make policy. And that's where we start. But I think we've also got to get out there and start leading discussions and find excuses to talk about things and just be cheeky. The way I have, amongst the reasons why we're the only place in the entire United Kingdom in Westmoreland where the Liberal Democrats got more than 50% of the vote, is that I don't wait for the press to come to me. I nag them every day with something, and you give them something. And if you nag them once or twice a day, you get in 3 or 4 times a week. And you go in with what you've got to work out what your issues are, what your priorities are, what you want to be known for. And if our priorities are going to be climate change, if they are going to be civil liberties, if it is going to be a fair deal on housing and dealing with those civil inequalities, just to pick those 3, then you make sure you do nothing to talk about those things constantly. So the people, as the months go by, realise you're the party who talks the truth in that sort of way. And the strapline for the manifesto in 2005 when Charles was the leader was freedom, fairness, trust. And we picked those 3 lines, nothing to do with me, those 3 words because they resonated. People looked at Charles and the Liberal Democrats and thought, yes, that's what they're for. That adds up. And we need to have people saying similar things about us in not just 5 years' time, but much sooner. I mean, whenever I'm on Question Time and I get asked similar questions about migration, asylum and so on, to be honest with you, they're the questions I enjoy the most. Because I know that the other 4 people on the panel probably are going to shilly-shally about, trying to, not offend the UKIP-minded voters too much. And I will use words like, I'll talk about the fact that immigration is a blessing and not a curse. And I will talk about the fact that whatever has prompted the migration of those people, if our first thought isn't compassion for them, both as they try to flee, but also when those people who do manage to come here, treating them as dignified human beings, and talking about what it is to be proud to be British, is to be proud of the way we treat the vulnerable, whether it be people who lived here all their lives, whether they come from elsewhere. And that to me is a no-brainer. And it's a way of actually reaching out to people who think, and whenever I look at Twitter afterwards, when you've said things like that, I watch all the kind of bile that I get from people who think they should all be sent back home or left to drown or shocking things like that. And I'm always heartened by the fact people say they were the only people who said this. They were the only people that were on the panel tonight was the only person who stood up for the vulnerable, who didn't try and worry about what the Express or the Mail write about them tomorrow. And that is the party we've got to be. We've got to be prepared to say the things to people, other people are too afraid and ashamed to say. We're on the side of the powerless. And if you are getting onto some rickety boat to cross the Mediterranean, you must have jolly flipping good reason to do so. And we stand by whatever their motivations are, stuff their motives. My compassion is for them as individuals, and we as a party must be absolutely clear, without a word of equivocation, that we're on their side. And the thing that brought me to tears on election night was the loss of Simon Hughes, and I particularly was moved by him, because just think about it, in the same way that Nick Clegg absolutely expending all that effort and that political capital to end the detention of children for asylum purposes. He didn't win a single flipping vote from that, but he did a right thing, and we should be proud of him and what we did. And then Simon Hughes spent 32 years finding the kind of people who either can't or won't vote. And whatever you think, and I don't want to be mean about the guy who took his seat, but he's some lobby fodder, some Labour lobby fodder, and those people are left without a voice because of the result of that election. And so we need to communicate to ourselves first, and then to the people out there, that if we don't speak for those people, no bugger else will. And that's why we're here, and that is why winning is not grubby or dirty, but essential.